I stared at my phone, reading the message from my mother-in-law for the 10th time, family dinner tonight. Don't be late. As always, my stomach churned at the thought of another evening enduring Margaret Reed's thinly veiled critiques and disapproving glances. I'm Vivian Reed, and at 34, I own one of the most innovative and profitable real estate development firms in Boston. Not that my husband's family knows this. To them, I'm just Harrison's wife who dabbles in property management. The delicious irony? They all live in my premier luxury building, paying rent to the very woman they consider beneath their social standing. Earth to Viv. Cassandra waved her hand in front of my face, bringing me back to our lunch meeting at the trendy bistro overlooking the Commons. You're thinking about the dinner at Margaret's, aren't you? How can I not? I pushed my arugula salad around the plate as my appetite started to vanish. She's already starting with the pointed texts. You know how she gets when the whole academic crowd is involved. You could always tell them, you know. Cassandra raised an eyebrow, her expression a mix of amusement and concern. About owning the building? About everything? I forced a laugh that didn't quite reach my eyes. Besides, it's better this way. Easier to manage tenants who don't know their landlord. Is the uncultured daughter-in-law. They love to critique over wine and cheese. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Phoebe, my sister-in-law. Mom wants to know if you're bringing anything tonight. Perhaps something you can buy from the store easily, since we know how consumed you are with your business ventures. God, the passive-aggressive emojis, I muttered, showing Cassandra the message. The way Phoebe wrote a business ventures made it sound like I was running a questionable operation out of a basement. Remind me, again, why you let Boston's elite academic circle live in your building? Because I'm a masochist, I sighed, smoothing down my Chanel blazer, a armor of sorts for these family gatherings. Actually, it was Harrison's idea. He thought it would help bridge the gap between his mother's world and mine. If he only knew. The truth was, I'd built my empire methodically over the past decade, starting with one historic brownstone renovation, then another, until I owned half the prestigious properties in Beacon Hill. The crown jewel? The luxury apartment complex where Margaret Reed, former art history professor, held court with her academic circle, all blissfully unaware that their rent checks funded the very success they dismissed. Ms. Reed. Emma, my assistant, approached our table with a tablet in hand. The contractors are ready for the walkthrough at the new mixed-use development on Beacon Street. Thanks, Emma. I'll be there in 10. I turned back to Cassandra. Duty calls. Viv, wait. Cassandra grabbed my wrist, her expression serious. Promise me something? Don't let Margaret get to you tonight. Remember, you're the one revolutionizing Boston's skyline while they debate brush strokes in their ivory tower. I nodded, but we both knew better. My mother-in-law, Margaret Reed, had perfected the art of intellectual condescension. Since the day Harrison introduced me, nothing about my public university background and business success had met her rarefied standards. Even marrying Harrison, a respected museum curator, somehow fell short of her academic dynasty expectations. The afternoon disappeared in a whirlwind of meetings and site inspections. Before I knew it, I was standing outside Margaret's apartment, my apartment, technically, smoothing down my understated Dior dress, selected carefully to avoid appearing nouveau riche. There you are. Harrison appeared behind me, still carrying his leather portfolio from the museum. I was worried the development project would keep you late. I let him kiss my cheek, grateful for his unwavering support, even if he didn't know the full scope of my success. We'd kept our finances separate by mutual agreement, and he never questioned the comfortable lifestyle my modest real estate firm provided. Ready? He asked, reaching for the doorbell. as ready as one can be for an evening of academic posturing. The door swung open to reveal Margaret, impeccably styled in Hermes as always. Finally. Everyone's been waiting. Blake and Phoebe brought the most exquisite Bordeaux from their cellar. Blake, my brother-in-law, stood in the living room with his characteristic banker's smirk. "Hey, Viv, rough day moving furniture around? You look exhausted." "Actually, I started, but Margaret smoothly cut me off. "Vivian dear, you really should consider a less taxing occupation. I keep telling you, all this manual labor at your age will only lead to premature aging." I caught Penelope Fisher, Margaret's colleague and neighbor, hiding a satisfied smile behind her wine glass. She occupied the penthouse apartment, my most expensive unit, and never missed an opportunity to witness Margaret's artful dismantling of the common daughter-in-law. "Harrison," Margaret turned to my husband, her voice warming considerably, "the new modern art exhibition is receiving such wonderful reviews. At least one of you is making meaningful contributions to society." I felt my phone vibrate in my purse, probably Cassandra checking in. She knew how these academic dinner parties usually went. Instead of checking it, I fixed my professional smile and headed for the kitchen to help Phoebe with the dishes. "Don't trouble yourself," Phoebe called out with practiced refinement. "I know you're not really accustomed to proper entertaining." I gripped the marble counter, steadying myself. If they only knew that I'd closed a multi-million-dollar historic property acquisition this morning, that the renovation they were all complaining about in the building's east wing was actually part of my preservation meets modernization initiative, that every luxury amenity they enjoyed in this prestigious address was thanks to my innovative business approach. But tonight wasn't the night for revelations. At least that's what I thought until Margaret's voice carried from the dining room. "Everyone, please be seated. I have an announcement to make about the building's management." My head snapped up, something in her cultured tone made my stomach tighten. Perhaps tonight would be more interesting than I'd anticipated. I hurried to the dining room, my heart racing beneath my carefully chosen understated jewelry. Margaret stood at the head of the table, crystal wine glass in hand, commanding attention like a department chair addressing her faculty. "The building's management has become absolutely intolerable lately," she announced. "That's why I've initiated a petition to have them removed. The vintage Bordeaux I just sipped went down the wrong way." I coughed, and Harrison patted my back with concern. "Are you all right?" he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak as Margaret continued. "I've already secured signatures from most of the distinguished residents on our floor," she said with academic pride. "Penelope, you'll support this initiative, won't you?" Penelope nodded with scholarly enthusiasm. "Naturally. The maintenance response times have been simply unacceptable." I bit my tongue. Those unacceptable response times were due to a comprehensive overhaul of the building's historic electrical system, an upgrade I'd ordered after discovering the previous owner's negligence of the property's heritage. "Vivian," Blake interjected, swirling his wine with banker's precision, "you dabble in real estate, don't you? Perhaps you could finally make yourself useful and assist with this petition." "I don't think." I started, but Margaret smoothly interrupted. "Oh please, Vivian barely comprehends proper real estate development. She merely processes paperwork for that insignificant management company, isn't that right, dear?" Harrison shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Actually, the dinner looks exquisite." I interrupted, not ready for Harrison to defend my professional reputation. "Phoebe, did you prepare the cocoa vin?" "Catered," Phoebe admitted with a dismissive wave. "Some of us are too occupied with meaningful social obligations to cook." The subtle barb wasn't lost on me. Last month, I declined to support her latest charity gala, citing work commitments. She'd been particularly cold since then. Speaking of meaningful contributions, Margaret set down her crystal glass. Blake has just been made senior partner at Goldman. Now that's what I call genuine achievement. Congratulations, I managed, though the words felt like ashes in my mouth. Thanks, Viv. Blake's smile had all the warmth of a shark. You know, if you ever want to elevate yourself beyond shuffling rental agreements, I could mention your name to our real estate division. Entry-level positions, naturally. The table erupted in barely concealed laughter, the kind perfected in faculty lounges. Even Harrison looked pained now. Margaret turned to her academic circle, her voice dripping with mockery. I'm still waiting for your big success, but is it ever coming? She gestured dismissively in my direction. After all, she's just a nobody playing at business. The room fell silent. I could feel their academic scrutiny weighing on me. Margaret, I said quietly, I'm doing quite well. Quite well is hardly sufficient. She set her glass down with academic authority. Look at everyone here. Harrison's curating groundbreaking exhibitions, Blake's revolutionizing investment banking, Phoebe chairs 3 prestigious charity boards. Even Penelope's daughter just acquired her first brownstone. But you're still pretending to have a real career. That's enough. Harrison started, but Margaret was building to her lecture's crescendo. No, this must be addressed. I'm tired of watching my son's wife squander her potential. Do you know what they say at faculty gatherings? They wonder why Harrison remains with someone so professionally insignificant. The word hung in the air like a thesis defense gone wrong. I felt my cheeks flush, not with shame, but with long-suppressed anger. Margaret, I cut in, my voice carrying the authority of a CEO despite my racing heart. The maintenance delays are due to a complete modernization of the historical electrical system. The original wiring failed to meet preservation standards. Everyone stared at me, momentarily forgetting their wine. And how precisely would you know that? Blake asked, his banker's condescension on full display. I pulled out my phone, opened my emails, and slid it across the antique table to my mother-in-law. Because I authorized the renovation contract 3 weeks ago. What are you implying? She peered at the screen through her designer reading glasses. The petition is pointless, Margaret. The management company reports directly to the owner. And how exactly would you know the owner's intentions? Phoebe asked, her social superiority slipping. I stood up slowly, feeling an unexpected serenity settle over me. Years of enduring their intellectual condescension, of swallowing their cultural jabs, of letting them believe what they wanted, it all crystallized in this perfect moment. Because, I said, meeting each pair of judgmental eyes, you're all dining in my building. The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison's wine glass froze midway to his lips, Blake's banker's smirk vanished, Phoebe's perfectly composed face crumpled, and Margaret, my formidable mother-in-law's expression cycled through shock, denial, and outrage before settling on cold disbelief. You're lying, she whispered, her academic authority momentarily shaken. I reached for my designer clutch. Would you like to see the property deeds? The screech of antique chair legs against hardwood floor shattered the silence as Margaret rose. This is utterly preposterous, Vivian. I assure you it's not. I kept my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly as I reached into my purse. Harrison. Margaret turned to her son. Did you know about this? Harrison looked as stunned as his academic peers. Viv, what exactly are you saying? Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Cassandra's name flashed on the screen. Perfect timing, as always. Excuse me, I said, stepping away from the table. This is rather important. Don't you dare walk away from this discussion. Margaret's voice carried the sharp edge of a department head dressing down a junior faculty member. I answered anyway, walking to the kitchen. Hey, Cass. How's the evening of intellectual superiority going? Actually, I just told them. Told them what? A pause. Wait, you didn't. That I own the building? Yes, I did. Christ. Viv, I'm coming over. No, don't, but she'd already hung up. When I returned to the dining room, Blake was on his phone, presumably verifying my claim through his banking contacts. Phoebe was whispering frantically to Harrison. Margaret stood rigid, her academic poise severely tested. This is completely impossible, Blake declared, looking up from his phone. The building is owned by VR Properties. VR? I said deliberately. Vivian Reed. But Phoebe's voice had lost its social butterfly confidence. That would mean I owned not just this building, but the entire historic block. I sat back down, reaching for my wine glass. And the mixed-use development in Back Bay. And the new luxury complex being constructed on Beacon Street. You're lying, Margaret repeated, but her voice had lost its lecture hall authority. The front door opened, and Cassandra strode in, carrying a leather portfolio. Sorry to interrupt the family gathering, but I thought these might be illuminating. Who exactly are you? Margaret demanded. Cassandra Wright, CFO of VR Properties. She placed the portfolio on the table. And your daughter-in-law's business partner. Blake snatched up the portfolio, his investment banker instincts taking over as he examined the documents. His face grew increasingly ashen. These are all legitimate, he muttered. Property deeds, tax filings, development licenses. Viv? Harrison touched my arm gently. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to, I said softly, but initially it was simpler to keep things separate, and then it became rather enlightening, Cassandra finished, earning a glacial stare from Margaret. Enlightening? Margaret's voice could have frozen champagne. You find humiliating your family enlightening? No, Margaret. What's enlightening is listening to you critique my property management skills over Bordeaux for the past 3 years. Phoebe gasped, her social composure cracking. The rent adjustments were necessary for the historical preservation work you all insisted upon, I continued. Though I did provide everyone here with significant family discounts. You're welcome. This is why you wouldn't support my charity gala, Phoebe realized. Phoebe, my quarterly charitable giving exceeds your annual fundraising goals. Blake let out a low whistle, still studying the documents. These returns are remarkable. Thank you, Blake. Still interested in offering me that entry-level position? His face flushed beneath his banker's tan. I simply cannot comprehend this, Margaret said, sinking back into her antique chair. How could you? When did you remember that trust fund from your late husband's estate? I asked. The one you deemed foolish to invest in common real estate instead of acquiring a summer home in the Berkshires? That was the initial capital, Cassandra explained. Vivian transformed $500,000 into a real estate empire while maintaining discretion because certain individuals, she glanced pointedly around the table, might have interfered had they known. Harrison stood up abruptly. I need some air. Harrison, wait. I started to follow him, but Cassandra caught my wrist. Let him process, she whispered. This revelation requires adjustment. Well, Penelope spoke for the first time since my disclosure. I suppose this explains why my maintenance requests were always handled with such efficiency. Actually, I turned to her, your requests were handled promptly because you're a reasonable tenant who understands proper channels. Unlike some residents. I looked meaningfully at Margaret. How dare you? Margaret's voice trembled with academic indignation. I am your mother-in-law. Yes, you are. And you're also my tenant. I retrieved my phone. Speaking of which, shall we discuss that petition now? The room fell silent again. I could see their educated minds reassessing every interaction, every dismissive comment, every condescending smile from the past years. I believe, Cassandra said, breaking the intellectual tension, this might be an opportune moment to inform them about the Beacon Street development. What about it? Blake demanded sharply. I smiled, feeling the weight of pretense lift from my shoulders. After years of concealing my success, of enduring their academic superiority, of playing the role of the uncultured daughter-in-law to keep peace, I was finally free to be myself. Well, I said, let's just say the current rent will seem quite reasonable compared to the market rates in that neighborhood. Vivian Elizabeth Reed, Margaret's face transformed from aristocratic pale to furious crimson, you wouldn't dare. But for the first time since entering this family, I knew precisely how much influence I wielded, and I wasn't afraid to exercise it. Wouldn't dare what, Margaret? I leaned forward. Adjust the rent? Enforce proper building policies? Or perhaps begin treating my investments with the professional respect they deserve? You cannot do this to family. Phoebe interjected, her social butterfly confidence crumbling. Actually, Cassandra produced another document. According to Section 8 of the lease agreement, we can adjust rental rates with 60 days' notice. Blake seized the lease, scanning it with banker's precision. This is standard contract language, but surely what? I stood up. Surely I wouldn't exercise my legal rights? Surely I'd continue providing below-market accommodations while you mock my professional achievements? The door opened, and Harrison walked back in, his curator's composure masking deeper emotions. We need to talk, Viv. Harrison, Margaret latched onto him like a drowning academic clutching a tenure offer, surely you'll reason with her. Actually, he said quietly, I believe I need to discuss with my wife why she felt she couldn't share this with me. The words struck me like a poorly reviewed thesis. Harrison, this wasn't about trust, wasn't it? He loosened his bow tie. Because discovering my wife owns half of Boston's historic district during a family dinner rather suggests a trust deficit. Oh, how deliciously ironic. Margaret scoffed. She deceives everyone, yet you're all treating her as if she's the wronged party. I never deceived anyone. I retorted. I simply allowed your assumptions to persist. There's a distinction. A distinction that has cost you your family's confidence, Blake added with banker's precision. Cassandra stepped forward. Enough. Viv, we have the meeting with the Preservation Society investors tomorrow morning. Investors? Harrison's attention sharpened. What investors? I inhaled deeply. We're expanding. The Beacon Street project is merely the beginning. We're planning to acquire the historic warehouse district and transform it into a mixed-use cultural center. That's a multi-million-dollar undertaking, Blake said, his financial mind clearly calculating. Try multi-billion, Cassandra corrected. And Vivian holds controlling interest. The room descended into chaos. Phoebe began weeping about familial obligations, Blake started citing financial regulations, Margaret launched into a lecture about dishonesty and manipulation, but I could focus only on Harrison's face. When were you planning to tell me? He asked softly. I was waiting for the appropriate moment. The appropriate moment? His laugh carried no warmth. When exactly? When you've acquired every historical building in Boston. That's unfair. I protested. No, you know what's unfair? He gestured at the dining room. This entire charade. Making me appear foolish before everyone. Did you find it amusing? Watching us all navigate blindly, while you orchestrated everything? Harrison, please. I need space. He moved toward the door. I'll be staying at the museum's guest apartment tonight. The door closed with curatorial precision, leaving an ache in my chest, but I couldn't crumble. Not here. Not before them. Well, Margaret's voice carried academic satisfaction. I trust you're pleased. You've managed to destroy your marriage along with everything else. Actually, Cassandra stepped in, her tone arctic. The only thing being destroyed here is the illusion that you could perpetually diminish Vivian without consequence. How dare you address me in such a manner in my home? It's not your home, I said quietly. It's my property. And on that note, I accessed my email. I believe it's time to review everyone's lease agreements. You wouldn't, Phoebe whispered. Test me. I began typing. Emma, please provide current market rates for comparable historic properties and arrange a comprehensive building inspection for next week. We should ensure all units meet preservation codes. Vivian, Margaret's voice wavered. You're being absurd. No, Margaret. I'm being a businesswoman. Isn't that what you always claimed I couldn't be? Blake stood up, adjusting his Hermes tie. This is far from concluded. Our legal team will review every document. By all means, Cassandra smiled. I'm certain they'll enjoy matching wits with our preservation law specialists. Viv, Phoebe implored, consider what you're doing. I surveyed the table, taking in their expressions, shocked, outraged, betrayed. The academic elite who had dismissed me for years suddenly realizing they'd been living under my patronage all along. I have considered it, I said as I rose. I've considered it through every condescending comment about my little business, every dismissal of my achievements, every time you reduced me to Harrison's working-class wife. And now. I collected my clutch and nodded to Cassandra. Now I'm finished considering. It's time for action. As we moved toward the door, Margaret called out, "You'll come to regret this decision." I turned back one final time. No, Margaret. My only regret is not revealing this sooner. The door closed behind us, and for the first time that evening, I permitted myself a smile. The truth had finally emerged, but somehow this felt less like a conclusion and more like an opening chapter. The next morning, my phone overflowed with notifications. 17 missed calls from Margaret, 23 messages from Phoebe, and one formal email from Blake's investment firm. They're certainly efficient, Cassandra remarked, reading over my shoulder in our corner office, but their threats are baseless. The documentation is impeccable. It's not the legal posturing that concerns me. I showed her the latest message from Harrison. We need to discuss this. Coming to the office at noon. Want me to remain? No, I need to handle this privately. I massaged my temples. How's the situation management progressing? Margaret's been contacting every resident in the building, attempting to organize resistance. Cassandra's lips curved. Apparently, people are hesitant to challenge their property owner. My phone buzzed again. Phoebe sent a message, "Mom's experiencing a crisis." How could you be so cruel? Delete, I murmured, dismissing the message. Any updates from the Preservation Society investors? They're fully committed. In fact, they're more intrigued now that they know you're not merely a silent partner. The brilliant woman quietly revolutionizing historic preservation narrative is particularly compelling. A knock at the door made us both look up. Harrison stood there, his curator's composure masking obvious fatigue. "I'll give you privacy," Cassandra said, collecting her reports. Harrison took her vacant seat, his eyes taking in my executive office with its restored Victorian architecture and views of historic Beacon Hill. "So this is your actual domain," he said finally. "Harrison, let me." He raised a hand. I spent the night in contemplation. About us. About why you felt compelled to conceal all this. "I didn't conceal it because of you," I said softly. "Didn't you?" He leaned forward. "We've shared 5 years of marriage, Viv. 5 years believing we were equals, partners, and all this time, we are equals." I protested. "Your curatorial work is just as significant." "My work?" He gave a hollow laugh. "I'm curating modern art exhibitions, yes, but you own half of Boston's historic district. You're about to close a billion-dollar preservation project. How is that equivalent? Professional success isn't everything." "No, but honesty is." He retrieved his phone. "Margaret sent me your company's financial records this morning, attempting to prove you've been misleading me about our prenuptial agreement." My stomach clenched. "Harrison, I can explain. You needn't bother. I knew about your separate assets. I respected that. What I cannot respect is the deception. I never deceived you." "Omission is still deception, Vivian." His voice carried museum-worthy resonance, then he collected himself. "Do you comprehend how foolish I feel? All those times I defended you to Mother, insisting you were succeeding with your modest property management. I was the greatest exhibition of all. You weren't an exhibition. I needed something independently mine. Something they couldn't diminish or control. And what was I in this tableau? Another carefully curated piece? Of course not. I love you." "Do you?" He stood. "Because from my perspective, you cherish power over truth." A knock interrupted us. Emma appeared. "Ms. Reed, Margaret is in the lobby, demanding entry. Security requests direction." I closed my eyes momentarily. "Have them escort her out and instruct legal to prepare a formal harassment warning." "You're having your mother-in-law removed by security?" Harrison shook his head. "Listen to yourself. What alternatives exist? She's attempting to dismantle my business, my marriage, your business." His laugh carried no warmth. "That's your sole concern, isn't it? Well, congratulations. You've proven your superiority to all of us. I trust it brings satisfaction." "Harrison, please. I'll have my attorney contact yours regarding divorce proceedings." The word struck like a poorly hung masterpiece. "Divorce? Surely you're not serious." "Actually, I am. For the first time, I see the full exhibition." He moved to the door, then paused. "The irony? Margaret always claimed you'd never achieve anything meaningful. It seems you've achieved precisely what she embodies, someone who values control above love." He left before I could respond. Through the glass walls, I watched him stride past reception, past Cassandra returning with artisanal coffee, past the VR Properties logo etched in historic brass that I'd worked so meticulously to establish. My phone buzzed, a message from Phoebe, "Mother's being removed by security. I trust you're satisfied with devastating this family." I began to reply, then hesitated. What could I possibly say? That I regretted my success? Apologize for finally asserting my worth? Viv. Cassandra appeared in the doorway. The Preservation Society investors arrived early. Shall I reschedule? I straightened my posture, dabbed my eyes, and rose. No. Send them in. Are you certain? After what transpired is precisely why I built this. I gestured to the restored office space. So I'd never require anyone else's validation again. But as I walked to the conference room, Margaret's words resonated. You'll regret this. The question lingered, had I already begun to? 3 days after the investor meeting, I was reviewing lease termination notices when Blake appeared unannounced. Your security protocols need enhancement, he said, settling into the chair opposite me. I merely claim to be your investment advisor. You're not my advisor, Blake. And misrepresenting professional credentials is fraudulent. Speaking of fraud, he produced a portfolio. I've conducted some research. Naturally. I remained focused on my screen. How's Mother? Experiencing an emotional crisis, thanks to you. Phoebe's attending to her. In my property, I presume. Blake's jaw tightened. Regarding that, these lease terminations are entirely legitimate. I finally met his gaze. Your rent adjusts to market rate in 60 days. Accept it or relocate. This is pure retaliation. No, this is commerce. I rotated my screen to display the financials. I've been underwriting your privileged lifestyles for years. That particular patronage ends now. And Harrison? Is destroying your marriage also business? My fingers stilled above the keyboard. That's not your concern. Actually, it is. While you've been playing Property Empress, you've decimated every meaningful relationship. Was it worth the cost? Are you here for a purpose, Blake? Beyond amateur analysis? He leaned forward. I have a proposition. Uninterested. Listen first. He opened his portfolio. You're planning to develop the warehouse district, but there's a preservation code complication your team overlooked. I arched an eyebrow. And I can facilitate navigation. In exchange for certain considerations. You mean extortion? I mean family protecting family. His smile was banker thin. Maintain our current rates, cease this vendetta against Mother, and I'll ensure your development proceeds smoothly. I began laughing involuntarily. Something amusing? Indeed. I retrieved my own portfolio. You see, I anticipated this maneuver. My actual advisors investigated your firm's handling of historical property boards. His smile wavered. Fascinating documentation, I continued. All those private meetings, the convenient preservation rulings. I wonder how the ethics committee would interpret it. You're bluffing. Test me. I stood. Now, regarding those lease terminations, my office door burst open. Phoebe stormed in, her perfect composure shattered, tears streaking her designer makeup. You soulless. Phoebe, Blake started. No, she must hear this. Phoebe struck my antique desk. Mother's in the hospital. Anxiety attack. Does that satisfy your vendetta? I felt a flicker of concern, quickly suppressed. That's regrettable, but nothing. You caused this. You and your calculated revenge. Revenge? I laughed, though it rang hollow even to me. I'm simply managing my investments. Your investments? Phoebe's voice carried hysteria. What of your family? What of Harrison? Harrison made his choice. No, you chose for him when you decided your empire mattered more than love. My phone lit up. A message from Cassandra. Harrison's attorney delivered divorce documentation. Shall I handle it? Leave, I said softly. What? Phoebe faltered. Both of you. Exit my office. You have 60 days to secure new residences. If market rates exceed your means, I suggest commencing your search immediately. Blake rose deliberately. You'll regret this, Vivian. When you're isolated with nothing but your properties, I activated the security alert. And should you impersonate my financial advisor again, I'll report you to the banking commission. Security appeared promptly. Phoebe allowed them to escort her out, still weeping. Blake followed more slowly, pausing at the threshold. You know what's tragic, he said. You've become precisely what you despised about Margaret, cold, controlling, and utterly alone. After their departure, Cassandra entered with coffee and concern. I heard confrontation. Are you all right? Fine. I stared at the divorce papers. Have legal process these and schedule an inspection of Margaret's unit for tomorrow. Viv, Cassandra sat down. Perhaps we should pause. Consider what? Surrendering? Retreating? Considering that perhaps you're allowing this retribution to consume you. I lifted the lease terminations, my hands trembling slightly. This isn't retribution. These are consequences. Are they? Because from my perspective, you're destroying every relationship you've cultivated. My phone illuminated, a message from Harrison. Sign the papers. I hope you find what you seek. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything gained and lost this week. The investors were impressed by your presentation, Cassandra said gently. The Warehouse District project will establish you as Boston's preeminent developer. Yes, I whispered, reading Harrison's message again. But at what price? A week later, I stood in Margaret's vacant apartment, surrounded by echoes of academic dinners and intellectual confrontations. She'd been discharged from the hospital yesterday, and relocated to Phoebe's residence, leaving behind decades of scholarly memories and a hastily penned note. I trust you're satisfied. The inspection revealed multiple violations, Cassandra reported, reviewing her tablet. Unauthorized alterations to the historic wiring, non-compliant modifications to period fixtures. She always considered herself above preservation codes. I traced the antique dining table where everything had unraveled. Viv? A familiar voice called from the doorway. Harrison. I'll give you privacy, Cassandra said, squeezing my arm as she departed. Harrison looked different, exhausted. His bow tie hung loose and his curator's precision was absent, something I'd only seen during difficult exhibitions. Your attorney mentioned you haven't signed the papers, he said. Been occupied. I gestured at the empty apartment. Family matters, you understand? I heard about Margaret. The hospitalization. Did you also hear about the code violations? The attempted extortion. Stop. He raised his hand. This isn't you. Isn't it? Everyone seems convinced I'm becoming Margaret. No. He stepped closer. Margaret never built anything of substance. She dismantles. You used to create. Used to? Before this retribution consumed my existence? He lifted the note from the table. Was victory worth the cost? Before I could respond, my phone rang. Phoebe's name appeared. Aren't you answering? Harrison asked. I did, activating speaker. Yes? Mother's condition is deteriorating, Phoebe's voice cracked. The physicians diagnose severe anxiety and depression. She keeps declaring she has nothing remaining. That's manipulative, even for her. God, listen to yourself. Phoebe exclaimed. Your mother-in-law is collapsing, and you're treating it like a failed business negotiation. What do you expect from me, Phoebe? I want my sister-in-law back. The one who helped me navigate social circles, who supported my charity initiatives. Not this automaton who values property over people. Harrison observed me, his expression unreadable. I'm not an automaton, I said softly. Then what? Successful? Powerful? Isolated? Phoebe's voice broke. Congratulations. You've triumphed. Mother's shattered, Blake's firm faces an ethics investigation, and Harrison's leaving. I hope your empire justifies the cost. The call ended. She's right, Harrison said quietly. This transcends business. It's become about vengeance. They earned it, I whispered, but the words rang hollow. Did they? Did I? He moved nearer. The Vivian I married sought success to prove something to herself, not to demolish others. I haven't demolished, no. He revealed his phone, displaying social media, Margaret Frail in hospital, Phoebe's updates about family crisis, Blake's veiled posts about betrayal. They're performing victimhood, I protested. No, they're experiencing humanity. Something you appear to have forgotten. My phone lit up. Cassandra, investors concerned. Questions about negative publicity. Perfect. I laughed without humor. Even the empire wavers. Good, Harrison said. Good. Yes, good. Perhaps now you'll recall what truly matters. Meaning? I didn't marry VR Properties. I married Vivian, the woman who wanted to build something lasting, not destroy everything from spite. I sank into a dining chair, the same one from that pivotal evening. I don't know how to repair this. Yes, you do. He sat opposite me. You're a creator, Viv. You've always excelled at restoration. The question is, will you rebuild, or continue destroying? My phone buzzed, another message from Phoebe, Mother's asking for you. Harrison stood. The divorce papers remain on your desk, but so does the solution to all this. Your choice. He walked to the door, then paused. You know the difference between you and Margaret? I looked up. She destroys because she fears insignificance. You build because you understand your true worth. At least, you once did. After his departure, I sat in the vacant apartment, surrounded by the aftermath of my actions. The empire I'd constructed suddenly felt as empty as these historic rooms. My phone illuminated once more, a photo from Phoebe. Margaret in her hospital bed, looking diminished and defeated, holding an old photograph from Harrison's gallery opening. And for the first time since this began, I felt something fracture within. Perhaps it was time to create something new. Something meaningful. The hospital corridor stretched endlessly as I approached Margaret's room, carrying a portfolio of documents. Phoebe sat outside, her eyes widening at my appearance. Why are you here? Rebuilding. I displayed the portfolio. New lease agreements. Previous rates, guaranteed for 5 years. She studied me. Is this another strategic move? No strategies. Just. I inhaled deeply. Just a daughter-in-law who needs to speak with her mother-in-law. Phoebe rose slowly. She's conscious, but if you distress her, I won't. You have my word. Margaret appeared small in the hospital bed. Nothing like the formidable academic who had presided over countless intellectual gatherings. She didn't acknowledge my entrance. Come to evict me from medical care as well? Her voice was weak but retained its scholarly edge. Actually, I sat down. I came to share something. I retrieved my phone, opening a portfolio. Do you recall this? She glanced over. A photograph of my first historical renovation project, a modest brownstone I transformed while still in business school. You said it would crumble, I continued, but it didn't, because even then I understood how to preserve what matters. Vivian, let me finish. You were correct about one thing, I did become what I feared. I showed her another image, the first historic property I'd acquired. I became so focused on proving my worth that I forgot what I was trying to prove. That you surpass me, she asked, her academic disdain weakened. No, that I differ from you. I opened the portfolio. These are new lease agreements for everyone. Original rates maintained. She finally met my gaze properly. Why? Because victory feels hollow now. I placed the documents on her bed. I don't desire an empire built on retribution. That's not my nature. And what is your nature? Someone who preserves rather than destroys. Including this. I presented one final document. She accepted it with unsteady hands, plans for the warehouse district development. A cultural center, I explained, with a wing dedicated to art history education, named in your honor. I don't comprehend. I'm weary of conflict, Margaret. Weary of proving points. I want to create something lasting. The door opened. Harrison stood there, his surprise evident on his face. Pardon, he said. I didn't realize. Stay, I said swiftly. Please. He hesitated, then entered. Margaret looked between us. The divorce papers, she said softly. Did you sign them? No. I withdrew them, torn them in two. Because Harrison was right. I'm a preservationist, not a destroyer. Viv, Harrison began. I know this won't resolve everything. But I want to attempt restoration. Restore what matters. Margaret touched the development plans again. Why dedicate it to me? Because despite our conflicts, you taught me the crucial distinction between power and strength. Power demolishes. Strength preserves. Phoebe appeared in the doorway, Blake behind her. Is this genuine? Blake asked, indicating the lease documents. No hidden clauses? No clauses. I'm proposing a new foundation for all of us. Simply like that? Phoebe's voice carried doubt. No, not simply. We'll need structure, boundaries, authentic relationships, not power dynamics. I looked at Margaret. Beginning with honest dialogue. I don't know how, Margaret whispered. Neither do I. But I understand restoration. Perhaps we start there. Harrison moved closer, taking my hand. Together? Together. I squeezed his hand, then addressed the room. I'm not abandoning my achievements, I've worked too diligently. But I want them to represent more than retribution. The cultural center, Margaret said thoughtfully. Might I contribute to its curation? I'd welcome that, I smiled. You've always possessed exceptional artistic vision. Phoebe dabbed her eyes. What of family gatherings? New approach, I suggested. Everyone participates, everyone contributes. No more strategic maneuvering. And the building? Blake inquired. Remains under my direction, but with transparent communication, proper procedures for concerns, and mutual consideration. Margaret reached for my hand. For the first time in our relationship, perhaps ever, she regarded me without academic judgment. "You truly have created something remarkable," she said softly. "I'm still creating," I replied. "And this time, I intend to create it properly." Harrison embraced me. That's the Vivian I married. Looking around the room at Harrison's proud expression, Phoebe's tentative optimism, Blake's contemplative expression, and Margaret's tears, I realized something. Success wasn't about proving academics wrong, it was about proving to yourself that you could honor both innovation and tradition. "So," I said, retrieving my tablet, "who would like to review the preliminary designs for the cultural center?" As my family gathered around, offering insights and genuinely engaging with each other, I felt a transformation. This wasn't a conclusion, nor truly a fresh start, it was simply the next phase in what I'd been creating all along, a legacy of preservation, not dominance. And this time, I was building it with a blueprint that honored both the past and future.